I was reading a rundown yesterday at what's called Talkers Magazine, and this is what we were talking about Bibles earlier. If I could make a comparison, it is to talk radio, what the Bible is to Christian faith. And I was looking through Talkers Magazine yesterday, and it said the really hot topic this past week in talk radio had been the higher minimum wage in some parts of the country. Now, I want to bring this up because it certainly would be because the two states where it happened contained the biggest cities in the country, and New York and California, where it's going to impact people in record numbers, obviously. And so that's why talk show hosts at all of the big talk radio stations in Los Angeles, San Francisco, also San Diego, New York City, they're all talking about these things and the impact it's going to happen. So both states moving to a $15 minimum wage. Well, I came across a couple of things today that I think we have to share with you. The morality of unemployment. This is from the Wall Street Journal's editorial board today. Democratic governors on both coasts are busy deporting jobs to neighboring states. We told you this would happen last week. We said it would be Idaho's gain. With minimum wage increases to $15 an hour in California and New York, and the writer says, economically, minimum wages may not make sense. He's actually quoting California Governor Jerry Brown on that. So Brown has already said, hey, you know what? We just passed this. Doesn't make any sense. Well, why did you do it? Well, he went on to say, morally and socially and politically, makes every sense because it binds the community together and makes sure that parents can take care of their kids in a much more satisfactory way. So, in other words, it's gobbledygook. It makes us feel better that we've raised the minimum wage. Doesn't do anything for anybody in the long run, but hey, it makes us feel much better here as Democrats. The writer says about half of American families in poverty have no workers. As University of California Irvine economist David Newmark points out, many might take a $9 an hour job, except that's now illegal, which won't help take care of their kids. Elsewhere, in tacit admission of minimum wage havoc, the rulers of New York State are allowing areas outside New York, that's New York City, that would be in the impoverished upstate New York, of course, the place of my birth. They will be able to raise their minimum wage gradually to $12.50 by 2021, and that's a large jump over the federal. That's about $5 more. The reason is that even liberals know that the less prosperous locales in upstate New York cannot absorb the higher costs without economic damage. So they know they're going to be, well, those are upstate New York. If you don't know this, people think New York and they think you say, if I say I'm from New York, people think I'm talking about Manhattan and skyscrapers and the like, when in fact I grew up about an 8-hour drive away. And we were outnumbered by dairy cows. If you throw a rock in any direction, you got about a 50-50 chance of striking a dairy cow with it. And it's mainly Republican in upstate New York, outside the old Rust Belt cities. So they don't care about punishing those people because they don't vote for the Democrats anyway. We have a caller with us at 946. It's 52. And caller, you're on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yeah, there's a lot of these things that we've been talking about with this minimum wage, lost jobs, and all that stuff. I heard something on one of the other shows yesterday that the unions are salivating over this because they're going to get more union dues. And I think another reason for the higher minimum wage is that the states are anticipating higher tax revenue from the higher wages.
Yeah, I think so. Except that if you eliminate a lot of jobs, then that won't materialize. It's like raising the cigarette tax. The smokers, a lot of the smokers will quit, and all of a sudden you don't have the tax revenue.
Well, when have they ever thought about that sort of thing before they acted? And it's also not going to help the people because between the higher union dues and the higher taxes, they're probably going to be just slightly over what they're currently making.
A lot of these people will find ways to spend this money frivolously.
Yep.
Hey, thank you. If you have the liquor concession in that neighborhood, you may do very, very well. I'm just saying. Bill, that's not very nice, and that sounds like you're a bigot. Well, tell you what, having experienced some of these neighborhoods through my employment over the years, back when I used to be a street reporter, and then actually having to drive into Washington, D.C. from where I used to live, and we used to have to go down what was called New York Avenue. Actually, you see the shots of it in the opening frames of the TV series House of Cards. You come down New York Avenue, there's like a liquor store on every corner. That's a really bad part of town, although it's becoming more gentrified. So now instead of the Mad Dog 2020, they're just selling, much more of the high-end wine, I suppose. Well, of course, with liberals, the wine is generally like, we need to give these people more. No, wait a second. We'll get it back to something else in a moment. This comes from the Federalist. The Federalist has this today from a student who's 20 years old. He decided to leave college for a while and return to his hometown of Seattle, Washington, where they have a $15 an hour wage. Over the past 2 years, a whole lot of states and cities have rapidly pushed, he writes, through legislation to raise their base pay, likely in response to the president's calls for higher wages. You know, a bit more manufacturing would do that for us, but high tech would do that for us too. The notion that somehow, that if you're scrubbing floors, that you're going to be paid a lot more money. There's a reason the guy who's building rocket ships is likely getting more money than you are, because the market can't find a lot of guys who can actually build rocket ships. In fact, if we let the market just take care of all of this, we'd likely see some jobs, the price tag would go soaring, and other jobs, well, a lot of people out there can sweep a broom. My first job paid me $2.65 an hour. My first payroll job, I had worked cleaning out horse stalls for a few dollars an hour, and for my father and uncle for a long time, doing various odd jobs, putting up satellite dish antennas and the like, and working in the uncle's store and all of these things, getting a few bucks here and there, so I could, keep some air in my bicycle tires and keep the tires fresh. But my first payroll job when I was in high school paid $2.65 an hour, and it included sweeping floors and mopping floors and scraping puke off the dishes. I was working in a hospital kitchen. I don't know any better way to put that. That's true. My own daughter said to me one day, I said, I can get you a job working in a restaurant. This was when I was living at a beach resort. I said, I can get you a job working in a restaurant. You'll make $50,000 in tips over the summer. Pay your way through college, buy yourself an automobile. And she said, Dad. I said, what? And she said, I don't like putting my fingers in other people's food. Kid, you don't know the worst of it. Let me just put it that way. So the writer says 29 states have minimum wages that exceed the federal $7.25 an hour. The issue remains far from settled, and he's going on about all of the different arguments going on around the country. In Alabama, for instance, the governor, who, by the way, unlike Ted Cruz, has admitted that he has chaste skirts, Governor Bentley, he presided over a legislature that passed a law saying that localities could not raise the minimum wage. It's a state issue. Now, the writer says, my opposition to minimum wage increases comes as a direct result of my own experience searching for jobs as a new resident of Seattle, a city that currently has one of the highest minimums in the country. So he left college, he went back home, told his parents, look, I'm not going to leech off you. I'll find a job easily enough. I've worked plenty of times as a server, that is, waiting on tables in restaurants. Having a combined 2 years of experience and close to 5 years of total experience in the customer and food service industries, I assumed, he writes, I'd be able to find a restaurant gig in no time. So after reassuring my parents all would be well in the financial department, he says, I boarded a plane in Philadelphia and I came home. Yet 7 weeks and more than 70 job applications later, I still have yet to land a part-time minimum wage job. Soon enough, it became clear, through talking with potential employers and local college students also trying to find work, that my failure to land a job was likely due, at least in part, to Seattle's absurdly high minimum wage. Because they're not hiring new people. What they're doing is they're laying people off. If you got to make a business, a lot of restaurant businesses, the margins are so narrow, and then the government comes along and says, well, here's what you're going to do, and this will be good for all of those people out there, minorities, who will vote for us. Well, it won't be good for you, but you run a business. You're already an oppressor. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Hi, I think that people are missing another thing, too, and that's incentive and motivation. For instance, I had a construction company for years, and I would start people at a little bit lower wage, and to be honest, $15 is pretty good around this area, and they would work their way up to it, and then I could cull out the ones that didn't get there, and the other ones would see that these people were getting regular raises and working their way up to that point, rather than having to just start people you know nothing about at a higher wage.
Yeah, I think we have to realize that people, if they're motivated, they'll take certain jobs, and I thank you for the call and share my own little story on that. In 2006, I'm looking at right now at a picture of Hillary Clinton on my TV monitor here in the studio. I think I've shared the story before. I ticked off Hillary Clinton on my radio program. It only made her angrier that our little spat got picked up and aired on the Laura Ingraham radio show and Sean Hannity's radio show. And Sean browbeat her with it for about a week. He continued to play it for several days on his program. The owner of our company, who owned a huge radio station in New York City called WOR at the time, happened to be at some event and ran into Hillary, and she started spouting off about me. And then she said to him, because he was not apologetic. So then she said, "Oh, I see you got a radio station up for renewal, license renewal. Be a shame if that didn't happen." So all of a sudden, I didn't have a job in radio any longer. My talk show was gone. Because somebody decided, well, we're going to cut our losses. We'll throw Colley overboard because of that. And so I ended up needing work and trying to find a talk radio job. You got to remember, you got a radio station, a radio company in America that owns over 800 stations, about 850. That company owns about 200 talk radio stations, but mostly those radio stations are just repeaters for syndicated shows. Why? Because that company is $21 billion in debt with $3.8 billion in assets. So they're not hiring talk show hosts, and they haven't been for a long, long time. And then you've got a couple of other companies in similar problems, so all they do is they just, that's why when you drive down the road, you hear, if you're listening to Hannity, you don't have to worry about losing the signal. Just hit the search button, you're going to find him somewhere else. But that means there aren't a lot of local talk radio jobs. So while I was looking for a new talk radio job in the summer of 2006, I had lunch with a friend after I went to daily Mass. Came out of Mass, and I ran into a buddy of mine as he was leaving the church, and he said, "Oh, let's grab some breakfast." And he was telling me, he said he had retired after 43 years working in what is called a PD&C, I believe, a postal delivery center. This is the big factories where they bring in the big 18-wheel trucks, drop off mail and packages, and then guys run them all through sorters and load them and do these things and push around 1,400-pound cages of mail. And I hadn't done a lot of manual labor because I'm a broadcaster. I hadn't done a lot of manual labor in 20-some years. Well, I went out to the postal sorting plant because he said, they'll be gearing up to hire temporary people as we get toward the holiday season. And lo and behold, I got hired. $11 an hour was not bad, I thought. It was not anywhere near what I'd been making in talk radio, but I still had a little girl in high school. And luckily, I had finished my car payment, so I could handle that. But we had to figure out a way around expenses. It turns out the post office gave me all the work that I wanted. In fact, they were constantly coming up to me. I was working the overnight shift, and they'd say, "Hey, can you stick around for another 4 hours?" And I would calculate in my head, well, $44 more, okay, and after they take the benefits out and everything else, or taxes, I'll have 22 of that. I could use the $22, and I'd stay on the job. But when I was unloading some of those trucks out on the loading dock in North Syracuse, New York in January when it's 20 below at night, and I'm out there in a parka all alone unloading these trucks and pushing these massive cages of mail around and then throwing the bags out, it caught up with me quite quickly that I had not done this type of work in a very long time, and I started popping ibuprofen every night before I'd start the job. I'd go into my locker, pull out the bottle, pop one of those things in, and because I was constantly sore. And after a while, the soreness went away. It was not the job I wanted to do the rest of my life. It was the job that I had to do. That's motivation. And did I want a job that paid more money? Sure. But you know what? Sometimes you have to bide your time. I remember talking to a fellow who tried to offer me a job in Springfield, Missouri at the time, and then he ended up losing his job, so I didn't get the job in Missouri, and I was talking with him on the telephone. He said, "Well, sometimes in life you have to zig when you need to zag," and he said, "You'll find a way." And I did. And 15 months later, I got a job at a radio station somewhere else doing talk radio, and I got to spend 7 lovely years there. But you've got to do what you've got to do, and I'll tell you what, even though I wasn't making $15 an hour, I just figured, well, I'll work more if I get the opportunity. And when I was a young guy, that's how I did it. I would work as many hours as I could at washing dishes or whatever else because, all right, if you add another couple of hours on the end of the day, that's a little extra money in the wallet. That's how I always looked at it. And I think that a lot of people out there, if they don't have that desire or they don't have, and the government safety net, I didn't have to use that. But the government safety net, a lot of people in this day and age think it's quite acceptable to keep staying on that safety net as long as they can. We've bred generations of them. We've told them, don't worry about it. Don't be humiliated by food stamps. Don't worry about it. Stay home, put your feet up, have some chicken wings. Government will take care of you. God willing and the creek don't rise, I'm back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Next, following the news at 10 o'clock from Fox, it's Rush Limbaugh. Have a great day.